Hello again, everybody. This video is to share with you all some of the ideas that I've been having around whole tone and augmented chords. When I discovered meta harmony, one of the things that seemed particularly useful to me was the color wheel diagram. It kind of shows some things about how the chords we're familiar with are put together and how diminished chords relate to any chord in the key center. So I thought it would be cool to do a similar thing, or try to do a similar thing with whole tone structures and augmented chords, and maybe come up with some new terminology and interesting ways of viewing theory concepts in the process. As we know, there are two whole tone scales. There are 12 notes in the chromatic scale, and if we split it in half, we get two whole tone scales, two energies, yin and yang, light and dark, hot and cold, male and female. As Barry says, man and woman give birth to the diminished children, half the DNA from each parent. The DNA is perfect. And here we have the chromatic scale organized into two rows, so we can see them each. I decided it would be useful to have language to refer to these two whole tone scales. I've decided to call these two whole tone scales gold and silver. Here we see the two scales that we just mentioned, but now with their pitches above and below them and color-coded. Now, obviously, the silver whole tone does not start on C necessarily. It can start on any of the silver notes. And the same for gold. Here I have B as the first gold note, but really you can start it on any gold note. Every major scale has 3 notes from one whole tone, 4 from the other. For example, D major scale. We'll need 3 silver notes, including D. That'll give us D, E, and F sharp. Then our next notes will be 4 gold notes. G, A, B, C sharp, and those are all the notes in the scale. Let's take a look at a different example. E flat major. To use the language of one of my students, we start in the gold dimension because E flat is a gold note. E flat, F, and G are gold. From there, we take the portal into the silver dimension where we'll find our 4 silver notes. A flat, B flat, C, D, and we'd have to transport back into the gold realm to start the scale again in the next octave. Now each major scale, no matter if it starts with gold or silver, is going to have one group of whole tone notes that is smaller and one that is bigger, like how in the key of E flat, gold is the smaller whole tone cluster and silver is the bigger one. Now let's say we want to call the smaller cluster within the key the moon and the larger cluster the sun. Then we can say that E flat major has a gold moon and a silver sun. In other words, do re mi is the moon and fa sol la ti is the sun. Let's take a look at another example. A flat major scale starts with 3 silver notes. A flat, B flat, C, and then gold, D flat, E flat, F, G. The smaller whole tone cluster is the moon. In this case, the start of the scale, A flat, B flat, C. And the scale from D flat to G is the sun, the larger whole tone cluster. Okay, so who cares? Why is this useful? Why would you want to know this? What's the use of these terms or seeing things in this way? Well, let's say you're a beginner in theory and you don't have all your key signatures memorized yet. Maybe you know the sound of a major scale, but you don't know all the notes in every key by heart. So if I showed you a list of notes from a major scale, but not starting on do, like this, it might not be obvious what key, what major scale this is. where do is. But if we know all these notes as gold or silver, now we can see where the moon is. Our 3-note whole tone cluster, do, re, mi, and we can tell that E flat is do. So this mode of E flat is a mixo mode starting on so, and all of the silver notes here are part of the sun. One more example. B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. Again, to someone who doesn't have their key signatures memorized, which note is do might not be obvious just by looking. But when we know our gold and silver whole tone scales, we can see that the moon is gold and that A actually belongs over here. Okay, now that we're kind of getting a feel for how this works, let's move on. So we know each major scale has a moon and sun, but there are notes outside of the key that belong to each whole tone scale. For example, in the key of C, C, D, E is the moon, but the other 3 notes we see on the bottom row are still lunar notes. They're just not in the key, not in the C major scale, but they're still part of the lunar whole tone, the dark side of the moon. Same for the notes in the top row. The 2 non-diatonic notes in the top row are still solar notes because they share the same whole tone scale as the sun. In each whole tone scale, there are 2 triads, augmented triads. Let's take the silver scale, for example, etc. If we build a triad with skips from C, we get the notes C, E, and A flat. And the other notes also form an augmented chord, D, F sharp, and B flat. The same is true of the gold scale. There are 2 augmented chords in gold. But let's put this all in a tonal context. We'll look at this in the key of E flat. So let's take a look at the lunar whole tone scale. From these notes, we can make 2 lunar augmented triads. E flat, G, B, and F, A, C sharp. The same is true of the solar scale. E, A flat, C, F sharp, B flat, D. I decided it would be useful to have a way to refer to these 4 augmenteds as they relate to the key. Since there are 4 of them, I decided to name them after the 4 seasons. Fall and winter being the triads built with lunar notes, since these are the seasons when the nights are longer. Spring and summer are built with solar notes, being the seasons where the days are longer. Here we can see each of the seasons, each of the augmented chords: fall, winter, spring, summer, with the solfege listed for each triad. Okay, given everything we've learned so far, let's do a quick quiz. The answers will be in the description, so after the quiz you can see how you did. Is A flat gold or silver? What about B? In the key of A, is E solar or lunar? In the key of F, is B solar or lunar? Kind of gives it away if I play it, huh? Take this scale here. Is D solar or lunar? In the key of E flat, what season does E belong to? In the key of G, what season does C sharp belong to? In the key of B, what season does D belong to? Moving on now. You know how sometimes people look at 6 chords as a combination of diminished notes? For example, in metaharmony, we'd say that C6 is a combination of yellow and red notes. C and A from the yellow diminished. E and G from red. Let's do something similar here with our seasons. We'll take a look at all the notch chords in the major scale. Here, I'll put them in this orientation, where the notch is the top two notes. Zooming in here, we can see that C6 is made up by two fall notes, a summer note, and a spring note. And it contains no winter note. Here we can see that the periodic F major 6 is formed by two spring notes. And here I actually have these two notes reversed. That was a mistake. Supposed to have a fall note next and winter note. And in this quadrant we have no summer note. Let's move on to the fluid G major 6. We have two summer notes, one winter note, and E, a fall note. And in this chord, we have no spring note. Let's go down to the orbital, what most people would know as G7. But here I have the flame of the chord as our starting point. So we have B, a summer note, D, a winter note, F, a spring note, and then G, a summer note. And in this chord we have no fall note. And last but not least, amplier, or D minor 6, or B half diminished. But with D as our starting point, we have a winter note, F, a spring note, A, spring note, and B, a summer note. And in this chord we have no fall note, which is something that these two chords have in common. They lack a fall note, which is not true of any of these chords up here. None of those notch chords lack a fall note. So maybe that should tell you something interesting about their functions. Quickly, before we go, and before I leave you with all of this to chew on, I wanted to show you these couple of diagrams that I drew up. So here I have the seasons, fall, winter, spring, and summer. On this side are the lunar seasons. On this side are the solar seasons. But there's this interesting shape in the middle that looks like two triangles, but really what it is, it's the trajectory through the seasons if we go chromatically. Sticking with the key of C major as an example, if we start on C, that is a fall note. So we're going to start here. And if we go to C sharp, that is a spring note. Then D is a winter note. And then E flat is a summer note. And E is a fall note. And it will keep progressing like that through the whole chromatic scale. Here, I have the same diagram but with a different shape in the middle. Let's talk about what this shape means. Basically, this shape is what happens if you build a diminished scale. Again, let's start on C, so our starting point is going to be here. C, then D, E flat is a summer note, then F is a spring note, then to F sharp is a winter note, then A flat is a fall note, A is a spring note, B is a summer note, and we are back to C. Now this shape is a little bit confusing, but we traveled to each season twice in the diminished scale. Now, let's go up here, and what I did here is I organized the seasons differently on this diagram. I put the lunar seasons in one axis and the solar seasons in another axis. Now, if we trace out a diminished scale, this is the shape we get, and it's a little bit more obvious that each season is touched twice. Let's do that. Let's see how that works. Starting on C, then D is a winter note, E flat, summer, F, spring, F sharp, winter, A flat, fall, A is spring, B is summer, and we're back to C, which is a fall note. So from looking at this shape, we can see that a diminished scale has an equal amount of lunar and solar notes, and also that it has 2 notes from each season, which means that there is a note from each augmented chord that is not included in this particular diminished scale. There are some things that I didn't cover in this video, one of the big ones being the concept of sterling and alloy, because, the 2 whole tones are named after metals. So, for example, you could have a sterling skip, which means you are doing a skip within a whole tone scale. And in this case, it means the same as a major third, whereas an alloy skip would be a skip in which you go across from silver to gold or gold to silver. In this case, an alloy skip would be a minor third. In other words, using a combination of gold and silver to create the interval. So it's not pure gold or a pure silver skip, it's a combination. That's why it's called alloy. But anyhow, all of the stuff covered in this video, the main purpose is to just give terminology and come up with interesting ways of conceptualizing things that a lot of us already know. Because I don't know, I just think it's useful to do that. And I think a lot of times it helps us know any given thing a little bit deeper. And that's true with things outside of music also. When we understand a concept through a different perspective, maybe through hearing somebody's experience, or through immersing ourselves in a different culture or learning a different language. As of now, these are just the ideas that I have, but I'm always curious to see what other people have to say about them and what new ideas, new concepts, new ways of viewing might be born out of me sharing these thoughts with all of you. So if you have anything to contribute, please do. And I will see you all in the next one.